Hello, everybody. This is the UAP Medical Coalition, UAPs and Family panel. We're here today to talk about stigma with relationships, with experiencers, and anybody exposed to UAPs. I'd like to open it up to everybody introduce themselves, starting with Ted.
Hello, everybody. My name is Ted Rowe. I'm founder of UAP Med, and it's a privilege to work with all of these people on this very important subject. We're here today to talk about stigma and its effects on families. So with that, I'll step back for our next person.
My name is Ron Westrum. I'm a sociologist and interested in the phenomenon reporting. I've been a UFO investigator for probably 40 years.
Hi, I'm Les Velez, co-founder, chairman of OPUS, the Organization for Paranormal Understanding and Support. We have had many experiences with families and especially children, which we'll be talking about later today. So thank you.
My name is Tyler. I'm a experiencer and a researcher. I also go by the Astral on Twitter, and I'm associated with the UAP Medical Coalition. Thanks for having me today.
Hello, my name is Dr. CJ Robinson. I am a licensed clinical psychologist in private practice in East Tennessee. I've been working with experiencers for a handful of years now, and I'm part of UAP Med.
Hi there, my name is Sarah, and I'm a mental health practitioner and forensic counselor out of Minnesota, and I work in international crisis and trauma. Very proud to be a part of the UAP Medical Coalition and working to help mental health and policy.
And I'm Jesse Peak. I'm a MUFON certified field investigator and ERT working with experiencers. I'm also the EM team lead at UAP Medical Coalition. And I want to welcome everybody to our panel today. And to kick it off, I'd like to pass it to our director, Ted Rowe.
Hello, everybody. Stigma in relation to UAP exposures occurs in many parts of society. Professional and academic societies won't speak of it. It's considered nonsense. And UFO events and personalities often contribute to those perspectives. When the U.S. Office of the Director of National Intelligence released their preliminary assessment of UAP in June of 2021, they cited three primary concerns arising from the reality of UAP, which were national security, aviation safety, and stigma. Underlying it all are people who've been exposed to UAP that are underserved and victimized by this stigma. They have to live with the experience amongst incredulous therapists, doctors, scientists, and others. The most difficult aspect for those with UAP exposures is the stigma that arises against them in their own families. The impact of a UAP exposure doesn't stop with the witness. It involves a family and family members watching the witness struggle to cope. And sometimes these families don't have the dynamics that allow for the change necessary. And I'll say in my own experience that I've had UAP exposures throughout my life, and it's cost me family. It's cost me friends. It's cost me jobs. It's cost me opportunities. And all because there's a stigma in place that doesn't allow, that thinks you're irrational or unwell because you have this going on. I have a bit of endurance in all of this. I'm a pretty tough nut. So I take it and I lean into it, but it's terribly challenging. The division this caused in my relationship, my primary relationship with my girlfriend was not fixable. It was absolutely destructive. And for people that already have problems in their lives, this compounds it. It makes it more difficult. If you have communication issues already between you, this will not make it better. And this is a situation where we need help, where we need mental health professionals stepping forward and helping people with exposures and supporting their families as well. So I'm going to step back now and let the group take the lead here.
Yeah, so I guess to kind of start the questioning off, just give you a quick background. This is something that has hit home with me very personally. I've experienced this within my family. I got into the field probably publicly around 2018. I was researching the subject. I had put it all over. My whole family knew about it. And I actually got a really good return. Most of the family was interested in it, had sightings of their own. But during a family outing, I had an uncle come up to me and basically shun me after I was just got done finished talking about an experience I had with my dad, with my cousins. And he basically touched my gut and said, you know, look at that thing. It's all that weird stuff that you're into. And I thought he was going to be laughing and smiling when I looked up, and he was all serious, in the most serious face I could ever, you know, remember. And it hit home, and it didn't only just affect me and his relationship, but it affected the others around us in our family. You know, he looked at me as like a kook, like we like to say. A lot of us think that we're crazy. And I looked at him as that he was uneducated on the subject. Now, after time that we didn't really go to each other's families' things, and we didn't really speak too much after that. And years later, about a year ago, I guess since everything has come out within the government realm, he's actually come along to support my work now. But experiencing that on a firsthand with your own family member who you've grown up with your whole life as one of your favorite uncles, it kind of shatters you. And, you know, you think that the person that you love and care about is going to accept you and do that. And it can happen to anybody. And the next part of what we're going to talk about is in relationships, because this is one of the biggest parts of this when it comes to stigma and being an experiencer. So I wanted to move on to Ron. Wanted to kind of talk about what impacts do abductions have on husband and wife relationships, because this is very important.
I mean, I
Sure.
feel like I want to chime in right away on that. You know, with the family dynamic, and Ron, I'm interested in everyone's input on this, but I feel like what you shared there, Jesse, when you're being exiled or shunned or experiencing shame or humiliation within your own family unit, it's very similar to that analogy of the fruit and the tree and kind of the skepticism and paranoia that's planted within your own safe space. And if you're struggling to grow in a safe space, your development and everything in the relationship at that point is kind of tainted. And I feel like your intimacy, some of the themes that I know that we will talk about today, as far as like sexual themes, intimacy themes, being able to truly relate and share things comfortably without thinking you're crazy, it's really impactful. And that dynamic structure, I think in psychology, you know, systems, it's going to pool out into other things. So I think it's a huge issue.
Absolutely, because it not only caused, like I said, with me and him, but it caused tensions within the groups of his side of the family, my side of the family, and who was on, you know, and that puts each other against each other. And it shouldn't be like that. It should be open. You know, you should be supporting one another.
And as Sarah said, you don't have a safe space.
Right,
You know?
Exactly. And then you got to feel funny every
Retreat.
time you're around that individual. You know, you're always
Right.
on your toes. You're on your tippy toes, and it's a very uncomfortable feeling. And I already suffer with anxiety and panic attacks. So having that on top of that, it can be very hard. Which is why we're doing what we're doing here in UAP Med. So back to you, Ron, with that question. What impacts do abductions have with husband and wives in the relationship status?
Right. So my introduction to stigma was that my father was told his demonic things. And I think for a lot of people who have a religious background, that's what it's, you know, UFO stuff is associated with. Husbands and wives often have a great deal of difficulty talking about this. I mean, I'll just give you one example from my field work. When I was on the Yakima Indian Reservation, I was interviewing somebody who had been involved in an abduction. And so she and I were talking, and her husband drives up. And my husband said, well, what are you guys talking about? And I said, well, we were talking about UFOs. And the husband says, UFOs, he said, and, you know, and who was a well-known experiencer. And he didn't say anything. And I thought, oh, crap, you know, this is really not good. She had never told her husband about this event, which was was very consequential for her and for other people. Another couple involved in the event had not been able to communicate successfully. And eventually, I gather that sort of led to the breakup of their marriage. It can be also something that's hurtful to interpersonal relationships between men and women. So one woman was essentially abducted from a seaplane dock one day, and sitting next to her was her boyfriend. Boyfriend obviously didn't do anything while all this was going on. And so when I met her, she was 35 and she was a very attractive young woman, but she didn't have any dates. And the reason was she didn't want to go out. She didn't trust guys because her boyfriend had done nothing when this abduction happened. She was 35 years old. So, we kind of talked to her about it and said, well, maybe he couldn't do anything. And after that, she actually tended to go out and actually, develop some relationships. But the problem is that people don't understand what the implications are. And a lot of times husband and wife simply don't talk about it. One of them gets abducted in the middle of the night. There's no traces. The other person doesn't wake up. And how do you explain this? The simplest thing is not to say anything about it. So then you've got this secret that you have to hide, and it's very difficult. And there are lots of cases like this. In many cases, both people are abducted, and one of them will talk about it and the other one won't, or they talk about it all the time. The famous Andreasen case, she and her husband, Bob Luca, had both been experiencers before they got together. So when I met them, they were happily married, and they just said, well, we're both abductees, and, that's just how it is. But for most people, this is something that you don't really want to talk about. One person told me that each of the spouses would be in their bedrooms. They slept in separate bedrooms, and they would hear some steps come down the hall, and then the steps would go out and so forth. And they assumed that their spouse was being abducted, but they couldn't do anything. The husband was a 6'2" bow hunter, very strong guy, throw me across the room. He couldn't move. He's paralyzed. So he never talked about it. And this is an interesting thing that I found. In many cases, a wife will talk to you, but the husband won't, okay? Because it's like they don't want to talk about it. So here's a primary issue. How are you going to deal with this? Are you going to talk about it? Are you not going to talk about it? What do you think has happened? How are you going to treat this? Is it a real thing? Is it something that you both have, strange feelings about? What's going on? All right. And of course, as we will see, when children come along, there are a whole set of new issues.
Yeah, and speaking of children, I know, Les, you want to speak about children having contact with non-human intelligences. When we talk about children, what age are we referring to, Les, when we say children? And
okay. Yeah, well, typically we're talking about people under 18 years of age. We've had people come to us looking for assistance without any parents being involved, and we basically have told these people that we can't do anything for them. They need to be with their parents if they're going to be seeking counseling. Whether it's a mental health practitioner or a hypnotherapist or something along those lines. But the dynamic in a family like that, as far as children are concerned, is an interesting situation, because it depends again on whether or not the parents have had experiences. We've had a number of parents come to us and saying, I've had an experience and now it seems like it's happening with my children. And this is very upsetting. Because their particular experiences have not been positive, and they're afraid that this is going to happen to their children. And then the reverse is true, where the parents have not had experiences, and the children come to the parent, and 9 times out of 10 the parent will say, no, it's just a dream, you're making things up, and you need to forget about it. But in fact, it's something that's happening to those children that's traumatizing them. And so it does need to be dealt with. And the third leg of this situation is the therapist. Who do you go to get the kind of help that you're looking for? Does the therapist have experience with this type of phenomena? And this is something that is so important, the educational process, getting that information to these therapists, mental health practitioners, medical people, hypnotherapists, especially those that have not had any experience with the phenomena, because, they need to be neutral, certainly, in working with the children. They need to be, good listeners, and then understand, the best route to take. And we've done some studies with regard to modalities that these therapists have utilized, and we're in the process of actually doing another study that will be published and be also here available on UAP Med for people to take a look at and to understand. So yeah, the dynamic with children is incredible. And most of the people that come to us are older, but they tell us that they've had experiences since they've been, 3, 4 years old, 5 years old. This stuff starts off really early. And so just as Ron said, and Ted has said, and Jesse, you've said that, these things are traumatic. They can mess up families. And then when you have the child involved and the parent is trying to be very protective, that puts a whole nother twist into the situation, that not only the parent trying to deal with their experience, but now their children are having this going on, and how do they get the kind of help that they need? And so that's, I think, what this organization, UAP Med, is trying to do, is get the word out, how best to help people and give them the tools to be able to do that.
Thanks, Les. And I would add to this, there's one other aspect to this for children. And that is, like in my case, I had a very major sighting. My spouse was with me for the first time. She'd heard me talk about this for a long time and then found herself confronted by it. And that caused a great deal of difficulty in our relationship. But then I have my son, who is looking at all of this and not having experiences of his own and feeling like he needs to protect his family and his parents, feeling like he needs to protect me, feeling like he's not in a safe space himself. I'm not giving him the suggestion that he's in a safe space. In fact, I'm telling him otherwise, right? Because I'm not safe. So there's a lot to this, and in the end, it's very divisive, and it leaves marks that last a long time. My son's in his late 30s now, and it's still there. I'm still dealing with this. Here I am now. So these things are long term. They're protracted engagements, and they have huge impacts on families.
One of the things, and thank you for that, Ted. One of the things that we found that some parents that have had experiences and that find out that their children are starting to have them, have actually been able to help their children get through the particular situation. And yours was where your child did not have the experience, and then trying to deal with your experience, which can be mind blowing, if you will. Somebody just tuned in here a minute ago, asked about pro bono, and there are some people that will do that in our organization. Some of the people that we can refer people to, but not all. And again, this is something that we don't get involved with the process of the client working with the provider. That goes on between those two people. We step back. We just give them the name of the person that we would recommend in that particular area, wherever they might be. So I don't know if I answered the question for the person that chimed in there.
All right. So Tyler, I know you wanted to kind of touch on this. It's kind of in the same realm, but compared to when you were growing up to your son today, and the difference of how it is back then to compared to now. Do you want to touch on that a little bit?
Sure. Yeah. And I think the stigma is really, what we're talking about here. And when I was younger, just sharing these type of experiences was I was very apprehensive, and there was a lot of, societal thoughts about where I need to go for sort of help if I had these type of experiences. On the flip side, I have a son who's 10 and a daughter who's 8. So I come from a perspective of really actually trying to experience as much as I can in terms of psychic experiences. I'm very interested as an experiencer in exploring the gambit and the spectrum of these type of experiences. So I've been a lot more open to these conversations with my kids. So for example, with my daughter, who seems very intuitive about this stuff, she has a life-size Elsa doll. And so, I would go through the simulation of the Elsa doll going to sleep, and then a smaller plush Elsa doll astral body would separate and then fly around the room and, have this experience and go into her brother's room and kind of see her brother sleeping. And so I would go through this with my daughter and just these sort of mental exercises. And then we would talk about our dreams. And so I think that's just an individual situation from my experience and the openness that I have with my kids. And I think to be able to not only just be open to listening on those experiences from children, I also teach, and I know a lot of kids, the younger generation, are having these type of experiences, but don't know where to go. And when they go to their parents, like we have a lot of in this panel, and kind of brushed aside or it's minimized in the type of experience, instead of really trying to explore it and to really get intrigued and curiosity about digging into the subconscious and those different types of mentalities and mindsets, I think is beneficial just to be able to explore these experiences on a deeper level.
Yeah, I definitely think that education is going to be a big part when we talk about this and continue the conversations in the community. That's how we get rid of the stigma, so that we don't have these issues with family and children, etc. But kind of getting into the therapist part of it and the medical part of it and what you can expect. CJ, I know you wanted to talk about different communications that therapists have with one another about how to help with these situations. Do you want to touch on that?
Yeah, thank you. So in preparation for this panel, I was kind of thinking and digging out, my old family therapy textbooks and just trying to look at this problem through that professional lens and that educational lens. And the stuff that I came away with and these are maybe just some pointers or things that I feel for another professional that may be helpful to kind of hold in doing the work. The first thing to communicate with a family, whether that be a dyad or the full group or whatever, is, hey, folks, you need to understand there's no specialty or no recognized certification for family therapy or any sort of therapy modality specifically for, people who have these kinds of experiences. So developing an understanding and a rapport based on, as one professional to another, our role is not to judge or to apply stigma. Our role, in fact, is to guard against stigma and to objectively and empathically kind of listen to what the family, the individual, the dyad, the group is telling us, and then helping from there to assess and develop a sort of consensus reality based on the structure of the family. Now, yes, this is part of my bias. Some other family therapists will be like, wait a minute, he just said some stuff that Salvador Minuchin would really be into. Yes, I'm very much a fan of Salvador Minuchin. I don't have the cigar or the Brazilian, bravado, but I like the way that system of understanding and working with families operates. And I think that when you look at experiencers helping families understand, well, this is how we communicate with one another. This is how or the things that we don't communicate about. These are how, like one generation, like, Ted, you talking about you having an experience versus, your wife, and then another level, your son. And then Tyler, you talking about your children, and creating that openness. Structural family therapy, and also I throw in a dash of internal family systems, I think is really helpful to just allow families to push through the stigma and push past the shame and start having a discussion, and creating a new reality. Sadly, a lot of the research that I was looking at in preparation for the panel, it seemed to focus a lot on make sure there's not a delusional set here. Is this a faux de deux? Is this some sort of shared psychosis? And so I didn't find a whole lot of help there. But assuming that we get past the point of a delusional issue, for this family member, having those structural, conversations of, well, if this were a delusion, would it be harmful to have? In what ways might it be harmful? If it's harmful, how do we mitigate that harm? How does it harm the family? And a lot of the concern, I think, and again, this wasn't something published, so I'm speaking, in my own family work here. There's this concern about social harm, the family being harmed by, oh, that's those weirdos who live up on the hill and they think that, little green men are popping out and don't talk to them, don't do business with them, don't support that family. Kind of like what you were talking, Jesse, just on a smaller, like one-to-one, with you and your uncle. So helping the family develop a basic set of psychological skills on how to talk to each other when something feels upsetting or when something has happened, kind of creating that family's own unique structure and system for managing that stress, right? That's what, I think is helpful, one professional to another, for me to sort of share. So let's see. And, finally, the last 2 points I would bring up is that, the reason we're all here talking about this is that relationships, their primary function is to buffer against stress. So if we have something traumatic or unexplainable that happens, that's stressful. And who do we go to? We go to our husbands, spouses, children, uncles, whomever, and say, hey, you've known me since I was a kid. I just had this thing happen and I'm really freaked out about it. I really need some support. So being able to support the family such that we're not focusing on the stigma or the shame, but rather the healthy structures that support communication and, that loving back and forth flow. I think that's important. And then finally, I would recommend a psychological evaluation, just something very light, like maybe a 5-factor model assessment, openness to experience, conscientiousness, extroversion, neuroticism, that sort of thing. And just looking at each family individual and the primary family systems, because that also tells us when we start mapping out genograms or family systems, who's going to be able to understand this and who's going to be able to communicate better about it, and who's going to have more need, and where those needs lie. So I just said a lot, but those are my thoughts.
I'd like to jump in just real quick there, CJ.
Yeah.
We've had a number of people that have come to us for help, and they've already gone to a psychologist or a psychiatrist because they thought they were crazy or going crazy, and they find out, guess what? They're not. So then what? What do we do? But on the other hand, a person, just because they may be schizophrenic doesn't mean they're not having an experience. That's another factor. So it gets pretty complicated.
Yeah, fair points. Yeah, people who are somewhere, within the DSM-5's, thought disorder flavors, they can still have very rational, unexplained experiences. Just as people who are not, within a thought disorder diagnostic category, they can sometimes have experiences that are unusual or beliefs that are strange. So yeah, great point.
You know, one thing I would add here is that I've been in and out of therapy over the years, several different times, several different reasons. But no therapist ever asked me about my family or how my family was processing what I was going through and whether or not they were there for me. Nobody really was concerned with that. And that goes for not just therapists, but when I took, some major roles in the UFO community, people were very interested in my experiences, but they weren't interested in the impact it had on my life and the fact that I was standing there talking to them when I should really, I've had my life derailed basically. Who knows what I'd be doing right now if I wasn't engaging on this, but this is the issue of the times and it's my problem. So I accept it and I take it on head first, but it's cost me everything, pretty much to do this. It's a full commitment and I don't regret it, but I'm pointing out that these things are deep. They have deep impacts. And again, you need to look broader than just the person with the exposure, look around them, look at their family, look at their children, look at, because it affects family, community, and society. Okay. So.
So moving on to Sarah, wanted to kind of go over some liabilities with family and kids. And when it comes to sexual experiences, one of the big questions is how can healthcare providers ensure their treatment remains objective and free of bias? That's something really big today with the stigma.
Man, such a huge question. And I think that all of the team members here have kind of hit on some of those examples where, whether it be spiritual or physiological, there's going to be some sort of world perspective that you have that's different than another person's. So if you are acting as a therapist or you're like Tyler, you're the parental role or a caregiver, what does it mean for your liability? I think something as far as UAP Medical Coalition is concerned, whenever we're reaching out and trying to inform people about how to reduce stigma, it's about what you say, and being non-suggestive, being open to different belief systems, whether or not someone is referring to Ephesians in the Bible and structures coming out of the sky, and or whether or not someone believes it's something completely different, demonic, like Ron and Les had shared. It might really be rocking a person's belief system. So I think as a mental health practitioner, some of those liabilities are, what are we doing to do harm, and just continuing to collaborate on the discussion, being able to assess someone, making sure, like CJ had shared, that you're doing a multi-assessment that is psychosocial. So you're checking that that person doesn't have addiction in their system, that they're not struggling in a space of neuroticism. The chat room had shared, maybe you're on the spectrum, which in other cultures is holy and awesome. Maybe you're not struggling to function at all. You've not had those experiences. Then you may not be seeking help at all, but you definitely have information to share and almost a certain responsibility, maybe if you're a person that can help other persons, be able to share that information in a way that helps support others who do need help. So I think that we're kind of in a catch-22 as a community and as a society, even as a nation, as a world humanitarian space of, we want to be able to educate people and inform people of how to reduce stigma. But to reduce stigma, you have to know how to inform people and educate people. So it's kind of this carousel that, you have to be willing to just jump on at 70 miles per hour. And that liability is going to be that there are some risks involved, reputation and credibility. But I feel like anyone doing any work in the support system space, whether it's a first responder, mental health practitioner, or a parent, to do no harm, I feel like cross-culturally is the pedestal that we stand on to try and grow from there. So if you can at least deduce back to, is this going to do harm? That you're not talking to your children about their scary dream and instigating that, robotic alien men are coming down from the sky and watching horror movies, that instead you're doing something that's more supportive, being able to talk to them, not being suggestive, just listening, just motivational interviewing, just starting there, I think is a great modality. But it's complex. So reaching out to people and hearing from professionals within the field is very much where I know I'm at, and those steps of helping to build policy to better understand the problem.
And our next question is, what educational and training should be implemented in the medical field to equip healthcare providers for UAP cases?
Man, I would love to continue to have this discussion. I think it is continued discussion. I know every state and then country is going to operate a little differently. You know, when we had talked about the DSM versus how other people are operating, if it's a mental health concern versus if it's a physiological concern, I think the assessment is probably the first step to the best training space and education wise, the beginning. If you could, I mean, people, it's kind of like quantum mechanics. You're having those experiences and then deducing backwards. A lot of metaphysical stuff, it is that way. You see the ghost, you see the experience, you have the thing, and then you go to the doctor to figure out what that lump is. So when people are coming to us, I think that the training and education needs to be cross-cultural. I think it needs to incorporate belief systems, but also physiological things, and remaining objective is really important. So military personnel, first responders, trauma, nurse, people that are able to see shock. I think central nervous system related issues, if a person in that, you know, time exposure is important. The sexual things, that's obviously something training is going to be, it's going to be needed from a medical professional, you know, someone who is able to understand the duty to warn, how to report, how to do it in a way that all the information is able to be usable and helpful. And that's kind of a difficult thing to do. I think first responders is probably where policy and training will start, but also in medical professionals, nurses, teachers, counselors, people who are there for children and adults alike, the people that you think when you call 911, dispatch narratives, you know, police, fire, what do you need? And for someone who's really shook, that also might include getting training with and around people that are clergy. So, and those are all people that we have been intermingling and collaborating with on how to make that training the best possible thing and to do it as quick as possible. It has to be efficient. So it's in the works.
So kind of getting a little bit more deep down into it, can you kind of just talk on the trauma from different sexual related encounters, how that involves the family, the therapist, and some things to kind of walk us through that?
Yeah, that's a good question. That's a big question. I think the way that I'm looking at it, at least now, is kind of like a first responder would, where you take whatever the functionality is. You know, some people haven't experienced the articles and research that you can find on like the UAP Med Forum and other places online that are, you know, reputable sources. They share that not all of the experience is always negative. Sometimes it is like what Tyler shared. It might be heightened intuition, things of that nature. So I think just starting with whatever the report is probably going to be the Achilles heel of first responders, that you're not being suggestive to, you might have frequency exposure or military personnel that are dealing with other phenomenon. This is going to be kind of taken on as an individual treatment-based thing. Physiological, spiritual, mental, some of those main subcategories that I think a lot of the medical community is already working under is probably going to be ideal to keep. And I think can be categorized UAP phenomenon in those ways. So it doesn't have to, you know, break away from the current medical model that we're using in America or in other places. So even though it seems and it is complex, like physiological, are you struggling with time loss, dementia, central nervous system, ontological things that keep you from functioning on a day-to-day basis, mania, depression, things like that? Or are you shunned, exiled? Are you experiencing like Jesse, you're no longer able to go to family functions and you need some additional community support? All kind of already things that are put in place for our medical model to assess. And I would love to see the UAP Medical Coalition and extended education and assessment already use that structure that's in place.
One of the commonalities, Sarah, too, is that people come away with these negative experiences. PTSD is probably one of the major things that occur, And so the mental health community it's pretty well set up to work with that, which is a real positive situation. But yeah, PTSD comes up a lot. It comes up a lot.
And even complex post-traumatic stress disorder of those multi-generational experiencers. So we're seeing some of that too. And exactly, I think that PTSD checklist is probably where things will branch from in a mental health space.
And it's their relative, the hypervigilance that often afflicts people who've gone through this.
You know, it isn't really that the mental health community doesn't have the tools to deal with this. They certainly do. The issue is getting them to suspend disbelief and apply them to this situation, you know, and they don't have to believe it. Just treat it like trauma, treat it like what it is. If the person with exposure says they were sexually assaulted, go there, you know, do no harm and don't make it worse. You know, I'm not a therapist myself, but it's clear to me as I look at the problem that this is really, we don't have to come up with anything new here. We just have to change the way we think, you know, so.
One of the things too, oh, I'm sorry, Jesse, I was going to just jump in and say that one of the things that is really important for this organization is to try to find more mental health practitioners, more hypnotherapists that are familiar with the topic and understand the topic. Because with these congressional hearings that are going on and the revelations that are happening, this is confirming for a lot of these people that have had experiences that their experiences are real. They're absolutely real. And so I think we're going to have a lot more people coming forward, and we need to be able to help these people. And so if there's any practitioners out there, mental health or hypnotherapists that would like to get involved, we would love to hear from you.
Absolutely.
And we got a question down below. Anybody want to?
I would say agoraphobia is prevalent in this community. I personally, you know, the harder it got to navigate in life, the more isolated I became, and the more I enjoyed my isolation because it gave me control. And I'm sure a lot of people feel the same way. They bunker up in front of their computers and hack away at this stuff, and they don't talk to anybody, and they don't talk to family, and they've already been through the washer as far as dealing with disbelief and stigma, and now they've isolated. That's the next step. So yeah, I would say agoraphobia is, you know, the rest of you guys weigh in, but my opinion, it certainly is an issue.
I agree. I shared in the chat room. I think it's very relative to the acceptance and shame. If you're in a community that is just not going to accept that, or if you're a professional, you know, I was very thankful for some of those hearings, like you shared, Jesse, that, you know, family and friends are now seeing things in a little bit different way because now it's on the news. It's somehow more credible. And those things are going to be important, and they're going to change people's belief systems. So maybe just time.
Yeah.
One of the things I've seen too.
Generation. Yeah, Tyler.
I was just going to talk about spaces and some of the opportunities that experiencers have now to share their stories. It doesn't really necessarily have to be public, but there are opportunities to relate to community members who are going through the same type of experiences. In some ways, that's a very powerful avenue for people just to be able to come in and listen to other people who have had similar experiences, and also to share their own experiences. I've heard a lot of people that listen in and then feel confident enough after hearing the discussion to come in and share their experiences. And I think having more of those avenues, platforms for people to have those discussions is just going to help the conversation and the stigma.
I found it particularly healing just to listen to some of our own videos, you know, because now I feel like I'm doing something. I feel like I'm actually pushing back against this thing that's had me on my heels all these years, you know, and along with that, I'm hearing from others, and I'm hearing from professionals, and I'm hearing from people that I respect. And so there's community and support that's increasing, you know, as the reality of this is accepted and as it's understood that some of us have made a terrific struggle in order to be here. And we didn't do it just for ourselves, although we had ourselves in mind most definitely when we did. So this is the next step, and hopefully we can move forward against this stigma and see some real change for all of us that have had these exposures.
You know, one thing, Ted, I want to first of all thank you for getting this ball rolling and bringing me in here, because the group knows that I have this other organization that has been helping experiencers since 1994, and one of the things that we do have is an online confidential support group, and that has proved to be one of the most helpful things for people to understand that they're not alone, that they can tell their stories, they can open up and ask questions. And so it's proved to be very, very helpful. Of course, the ultimate is to have a one-on-one, group where you actually can physically be there. That seems to be the most positive thing for people. But this online thing gives them the opportunity, no matter where they are, to be able to talk about their experiences. And so I thank you very much, Ted, for giving me the opportunity to be here with you.
My pleasure. You and I have seen it, so we know it's there. And that goes for everybody else here. A lot of the members of UAP Med are experiencers, and they're trying to do what they understand to be right about this issue. And we're all very grateful to have each other around us. I know I am, and it's been a real privilege. So we have another question, or?
Yeah, I have a comment, Ted, if that's all right.
Feel free, CJ.
One of the things that I think professionals who are looking at this group, would be well advised to consider is that when you are sitting with someone and they start telling you their experience, and maybe you start to have some sort of, feeling, or, your internal, machinery starts going off and you feel uncomfortable, and it's like, there's some of this observer discomfort. That's what we call it in the business. I would encourage other providers to keep in mind that when we have that sort of internal experience, it's on us, to examine it, to kind of talk about it, to understand it, and not put it on the experiencer that it's their job to make us feel better about what we are hearing. That's not how that works. That's transferential in nature, and that's problematic. So I think that lots of times it's easy for providers to hide behind the social stigma, that we're talking about today, and that kind of shields them from that internal feeling of, this is really unsettling what I'm experiencing, what I'm hearing. So that's just another thing I wanted to point out and maybe offer as a helpful tool for the professional.
It's important to understand that this environment is challenging for professionals. There is stigma. It can damage them. If you're a therapist, you have to be careful on how you deal with this. And that should be an indicator of how important this is. If you have to watch your step around it, there's very likely something very important to be dealt with here. And you can get your opinion in terms of what it is, but it's definitely something. And it's a global problem. I'm dealing with therapists on an international level, and they are in environments that are extremely oppressive, many of them. They're very interested in the phenomena. They're dealing with it in their sessions, but they're in an environment where their professional societies won't allow them to be associated with this. And it's particularly strong in Australia. It's strong in England. It's strong in other places. And it's strong here, but it's changing. And our job is to help normalize this so that people can move forward. And you can be involved with UAP Med under an alias or an avatar. You don't have to be directly identified with the program, but please come, look into it, see if you've got something to offer us, because a lot of people are in need right now.
And I think a lot of the younger generation these days are kind of open more to the possibilities of the things that we're experiencing as experiencers. And with, the tech boom, with the internet now that we didn't have about 20, 25 years ago, the information is there. And there's tons of groups all over the United States and in certain parts of the world that are there for support. Many of us on UAP Med and in the forum, there's plenty of organizations and help and groups that you can go and be a part of to get the help that you need. So you have people to talk to, and you don't have to be by yourself, and you're not alone. Because I think most people just need somebody to talk to, like a shoulder to lean on. That's what I like to call it. Working with MUFON's ERT. And after they're done talking, they feel 10 times better, and the group is just an extra, and that really helps as well get them out there involved in the field. So there are those things that you can get and take advantage of them. Absolutely. But I had no more questions. If anybody else wanted to touch on anything else today, or touch on any other points. No.
One point that wasn't touched on is that it's sometimes useful to try to validate the experiencer's experience. I remember in the Obarski case, which was the first one that Bud Hopkins came in contact with, this UFO landed in a park and disgorged all these little guys. So the guy who saw it went home and he just pulled a pillow over his head and didn't want it to be there. So fortunately, Hopkins had a friend named Tej Blocher, who was a really fine investigator. So what he did is he went around the neighborhood and see if anybody else had seen what this guy had seen. And he found several other witnesses. In fact, this thing had physical effects on a local hotel, where it broke the glass door that was in the front of the hotel. So the thing is, it's important to realize that in many cases, this person, even though from a therapeutic point of view, it probably doesn't matter whether there's something out there or not, it's very important to the person if you can validate the experience that person's had.
Yeah, absolutely. That's kind of where I'm at right now. My experience in Oakland looks like we might be able to find some evidence for it, and that to me is, wow. In terms of living in my world, that makes things a lot easier if I can, point at some evidence. But in response to this question about helping, did somebody else have something to say there before I answer that? No, okay. So as far as helping, we need volunteers on all levels. We need team leads. We need minions, in every ability. Social media people, this kind of thing. We also need project managers and leads, and we're looking for some specified positions as well. And if you're interested in have the caliber for that, please speak up. You can contact me through UAP Med, and we'll talk more about it.
Anybody else have anything they want to add?
I put on the chat that for those people also wondering how to help if they don't have the time or energy to join in some of those more, important positions on UAP Med, that just sharing our things on Twitter and social media, the importance of testimonials and exposure can help reduce stigma a lot. So sharing that link tree and just spreading the word where you're at would be a huge help.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you want to take a look at more of our work, you can go to uapmc.org, and that's also where you can find our forum at with all the information and research that we put out. I think there's a little bit of everything in there, so you'll be able to find what you're looking for. And you can also check out all of our YouTube testimonies from experiencers, medical professionals, everything you can think of to get that information that way as well if you're a video person. We also have our Facebook group that you can subscribe to, and our Twitter to get information. So we're on just about every platform right now. So we're easy to get a hold of as well. And I want to thank everybody for tuning into our UAP family panel today. I think we got a lot of good information out. And I hope you guys all have a wonderful holiday weekend, and have a good one.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
See ya.
See you guys.